Welcome everyone to the first Center for Responsible Business Rudolph Peterson Speaker Series event of the 2019-20 academic year. I'm Robert Strand. I have the privilege to be the Executive Director of the Center for Responsible Business here at Berkeley Haas. And I have a very quick question for you all. Who are the students? Let me see the hands of the students. Oh, this is beautiful. And first year students, would you stand up, please, so we can give you a proper Berkeley welcome? Welcome, everyone. Welcome. You are at the University of California, Berkeley, and I am not going to say that I'm any measure of success. I'm certainly not, but I was never able to get accepted at this institution. My congratulations to you, and we expect very, very big things. Now, as many of you learned who were here at the info session during the last hour, the mission of the Center for Responsible Business is to develop leaders who redefine business for a sustainable future. And one of the most significant ways that we put our mission into practice is through this, the Peterson Speaker Series. Now, today's discussion is focused on how companies are utilizing sustainability as a driver for innovation. And we're joined by IDEO, by Levi's, and very shortly we'll be joined by our colleague from Google. We are joined by our colleague from Google. So please come up and join us up on the stage here and welcome. I will leave the task of welcoming our panelists here further to Sara, but I would like to say something about our very beloved faculty member, Professor Sara Beckman. If you have an opportunity to take a class from Sara, do it. Absolutely do it. One of our most loved and frankly just such a pleasure to have you as a colleague, Sara. She teaches a class also collaborative innovation. And oh my goodness, what a beautiful class that is. And it really speaks to questioning the status quo of how we do business. Let's collaborate. We're not talking about competing, but how do we collaborate together to address our greatest challenges? And I think maybe we'll talk a little bit about that this evening here. I just want to say one thing here, because this Peterson Speaker Series also is it's a kickoff of sorts for our newest focus area at the Center for Responsible Business, and that is sustainable innovation. We look at the world's greatest challenges, we look where Berkeley has strengths, we put them together, and we say, where should we focus? And we've got an innovation thing, but a different kind of innovation where we use sustainability as a lens for innovation. And that's something that we formalized with our focus area. Sara, we're very fortunate to have her as a collaborative partner of this. Henry Chesbrough, father of open innovation, as a collaborative partner. So we've got something special here that we're cooking. With that then, Sara, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Robert. Welcome, everyone. Great to see you all here. As Robert suggests, there's sort of new stuff afoot happening in the companies represented here to really take advantage of sustainability as a lens through which to think about or execute innovation. And so I want to start by letting each of these folks, they'll tell you a little bit about themselves, but really I want them to tell you a story about an innovation that they've engaged in, a sustainable innovation that they've engaged in. They each come from, right, we have Michael from Levi's, Rhys from IDEO, who's going to talk about a competitor to the Vessel program. No, have you all registered for Vessel?
We'll talk about it in a moment. Yeah.
Well, then Rhys will have to fill you in. I thought it was all announced here earlier this week. This is a big thing for us to be embarking on campus. And Laura's at Google. So each of them is taking a different lens, a different perspective from a different industry on sustainable innovation. And what I wanted to do is let them tell you a very concrete story, each of them, about a sustainable innovation in which they've engaged, so you can get a real sense of what they're doing. And then we'll have a couple questions, and then we'll turn it over to you to ask other questions. So Michael, Levi's, what are you doing? Sustainable innovation.
Okay. Well, at Levi Strauss & Company, we focus on 4 areas for sustainability. And those are, you all know about material ESG issues. Do I have to So the issues around environment, social, and governance that are material to our business and to everybody in the apparel industry are water, chemicals, carbon, and people. Okay, so those are the four, pretty easy. So the one I want to tell you a story about is on chemicals, because we were one of the first companies in the industry to set up what we call a restricted substances list. That's a list of regulated chemicals that we can't use to make the product, okay? That's table stakes these days. So more recently, we've developed something called a screened chemistry process. That is basically something we ask all of our suppliers to do, our suppliers who use chemistry. We say, put the chemicals that you want to use in the product through this filter. And what it does is identifies those chemicals that we really don't want to use, that we want to completely phase out. Those chemicals that we know are safe, are proven to be safe, so they're safer chemistries. That's what we want to be using. And those chemistries that we probably need to find substitutes for as soon as we can, okay? So one of the chemicals that popped up on that kind of yellow list is something called potassium permanganate. It's a chemical that for the jeans manufacturing process gets sprayed on the jeans, and it helps to oxidize them, fade them. Okay, so you get all the different faded looks on your Levi's. Okay, am I going too fast? Okay. So that's what the chemical does. We said to our innovation team, hey, you guys need to figure out a way to get us to stop using this chemical and figure out another way to get the same look and feel, because we need the same look and feel. They went to work, and what they figured out was instead of using a substitute chemical or another process, they figured out that lasers could get the same look and feel, okay, at a fraction of the time. So before, we'd sprayed on the potassium permanganate, the workers had to scrape it out, you know, we had to wash it, 40-minute process. The laser does it in 20 seconds, okay? I want to show you a video clip of what the laser does to get that effect, okay? Hopefully this works.
There you go.
There it is. I'm in the way, so look, okay? Here it is. Okay, this is what we call a blank, so it's a basic stonewashed pair of Levi's. Okay, here's what the laser does. Okay, voila, you have a pair of Levi's. So this innovation was born out of a sustainability constraint. Okay, sustainability does that. It creates constraints on your product development process, on any other things that you do in the business. It creates a constraint, but that constraint forces you to do something different. It forces you to innovate. That's why we love sustainability for driving innovation. Out of this process, okay, we have many business advantages. Number one, we've eliminated chemicals. We've created safer, cleaner jobs for workers. One benefit on the sustainability side. On the business side, this laser machine can be located much closer to market, okay? So it massively improves our speed to market, all right? We don't have to make the product 12 months in advance. We can actually make it like 12 days or even 12 hours in advance, okay? Massively improves our speed. The second thing it does is we don't have to finish all of these special different finishes and then ship them. All we need to do at the factory level is make that blank basic stonewash jean. So it helps tremendously with our inventory management. We don't have a lot of excess and obsolete inventory lying around of finishes that people didn't want to buy, right? We can make what the market needs. Completely reverses the paradigm, okay? The last thing it does from a business perspective, we've digitized these finishes now. They're literally on an iPad. The consumer can go into the store, scroll through it, pick the finish they want, push a button, and literally in an hour, they get their Levi's delivered to them. Okay, they go shopping, they come back, their Levi's are ready. So massive business benefits from a process and innovation that was born out of a sustainability constraint.
Great. Thank you.
That's my story.
It's pretty awesome. If you ever have a chance to go watch it in action, it's very cool. As a former manufacturing person, this is awesome stuff. Rhys, tell us about
Sure.
cups.
Cups, yes, cups. I've got a cup right here that I picked up in the cafe downstairs. So Cups are traditionally coffee cups. These coffee cups, there's about 600 billion of these made every year, the majority of which go to landfill or they're incinerated, largely because it's a mixed material. So you've got kind of fiber, a paper-based material with a polyethylene liner on the inside, a plastic liner. And this was very much designed for performance, basically to hit certain performance constraints, which is keeping hot liquid from kind of making the paper moist and getting all over people. So that's the coffee cup. It was designed a very specific way, but it doesn't belong in any bin. If you put it into a recycling bin, it can't be recycled. There are some very specialized recyclers here in the Bay Area, but that is an exception. It can't be recycled because it's a mixed material. And if you put it into the compost, the paper will start to decompose, but the plastic ends up in the compost of the people who make compost out here. Compost is a product that composters in the city of Berkeley or Recology in San Francisco, they make that compost, they sell it to farms and vineyards and elsewhere, and they do not want plastic in their soil. That plastic then goes out into the waterways, goes to the ocean, and we don't want that. And then if you put it into the landfill, it'll go there too, but the paper in it will actually decompose, but in an anaerobic environment, which means it doesn't decompose as carbon, but it decomposes as methane. It releases methane into the air, which is about anywhere from 30 to 80 times more dense than CO2 from a global warming potential perspective. So it doesn't belong in any bin, and that's a huge challenge, and it's one that Starbucks and McDonald's and others have been trying to figure out for a long, long time. And so we worked together with them through actually a group called Closed Loop Partners. They're an impact investing firm and a fund out of New York City that is doing a lot of great work in accelerating the circular economy. And together with them as their innovation partner, started the NextGen Cup Accelerator. And actually, it's okay. No, you can say it. It's all good there. And so we started off with a design challenge. So these companies have been asking their suppliers, been asking manufacturers. They have their own R&D labs, trying to figure this out for a long time. But it's very complicated because the whole landscape is, of recovery infrastructure is completely varied. Certain types of manufacturing techniques work and scale and don't scale. So we decided to release this to the crowd. And so crowdsource the search for a solution. We got about 500 submissions back of teams and concepts who had ideas and concepts and working prototypes for different types of cups. And from there, through a series of sessions we've got Starbucks, McDonald's, Wendy's, Yum Brands, which is KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, Nestle, which is Blue Bottle, and Coca-Cola. They all put money into this consortium, funded this work. Together with them, and a bunch of experts narrowed it down to about 12 finalists. From that, we then took 6 to accelerate. Of those 6, 3 are reusables, and that's kind of what I'll focus on today. We've got Cup Club over here. It's a reusable system. Well, they're all reusable systems. Cup Club has these distinctive drop cases, these little drop points, where you go to a cafe, you get a cup of coffee. It has an RFID tag on the bottom, and also has RFID in the lid. It gets scanned as you check it out. It's given an identity. It's linked up to you. You drink your coffee, you then drop it in one of these points. These points get collected, taken to a washing facility, washed, and then returned back into circulation. The very similar one for Revolve. What's interesting is that these guys put a lot of the design, energy, and love into the actual cups and cases. Revolve actually is rebranded as Muse. Their focus is very much on the software, on really creating a software platform for short-term reusables and reusable containers, which is a really interesting play. So they're actually inviting other companies to build on top of their platform. And then Recup is out of Germany. They're already in about 3,000 stores right now in Germany. They're already live out there in the world. And they don't have there's no RFID, there's no QR codes, there's no tracking on theirs, but they have a different type of deposit system. And they're also already working with 12 different McDonald's in Germany, and so they're doing that. So we basically took them on a whole journey to help them to skill up and scale up in order to be pilot and procurement ready was kind of our mantra. Working with these teams to get them that place where ultimately they can be, they can run pilots with some of these big brands and open pilots out in the world, and ultimately be a supplier to these big brands. So that's what we've done, and right now working with the different cup teams to start thinking about what scaling and piloting looks like, which is really exciting because it's a space that is very new. Vessel just launched, I think, this week in Berkeley. If you had a chance to check these out, these actually were an early participant in our Open Innovation Challenge. They've worked with the city of Berkeley to launch a pilot, and so they're doing a similar thing. They have a QR code on the bottom instead of RFID, but it has the same type of trackability. You can track loss rates and things like that. So that's what we've been working on, and the goal here is to basically get rid of these cups and have these be kind of a thing of the past. All right.
Awesome. If you push the big green button, yours will pop up. There you go.
My visual is not nearly as interesting as the visuals for both of them. Hi everyone. Thanks so much for having me here today. So rather than sort of one longer story, I have 3 short micro stories. So when it comes to sustainability and innovation at Google, we're doing a lot of things on the operational side in terms of reducing the environmental impact of our own operations. But where I think Google really has unique capacity and something that's really interesting and special for Google is that we have these global tools, 9 to date, that have over 1 billion monthly active users. So a number of our tools really have a lot of potential to enhance the data that is being tracked around the world, and in particular environmental data, so that it can be used to find environmental solutions. So in particular, we have Google Maps, which many of you are likely familiar with and have used, as well as Google Earth. And when it comes to Google Maps, there's this aspect of Google Maps called Street View, where you can look at photos, sort of 3D photos of the area that you're going to visit. A few years ago, the Environmental Defense Fund approached us and regarding our Street View vehicles. So Street View vehicles are the cars that drive around and take photographs to enable that Street View in Google Maps. And Environmental Defense Fund approached us and they said, you know, we see that you have these cars driving around the world taking photos. Could they be doing other useful things as well while they're taking photos? Like, for example, could they be monitoring air quality? And so this is something that we thought was interesting. So we piloted it at first by putting some methane analyzers on the vehicles and took some methane measurements, and then we're able to build out some maps. And then we expanded it to different air quality metrics over time. Now this is something that we've recently rolled out to 50 different cities around the world. So our Street View cars are now mapping, or rather measuring, air quality, which can then be mapped. And we can use that data to generate heat maps that show air quality on a more localized level. So we first piloted this in the East Bay, actually in Oakland, and our Street View cars took 3 million data points on air quality at a local level, which was one of the largest data sets in air quality ever put together. And so we were able to generate heat maps showing areas in the city and areas in different neighborhoods where there's higher poor air quality due to things like highway overpasses or industrial facilities. And this data has utility for a number of reasons. One aspect is that it can help to uncover where there's leaks from methane pipes under the ground, which can be used by utilities to increase the efficiency by which they're replacing and repairing pipes, because currently a lot of the way that utilities are deciding which pipes to replace is based on well, they don't necessarily have the data that they need to do that. And so by accessing that data, they're able to, one utility in particular was able to increase the efficiency of that by 30%. So that's one example. And I don't know, I have a few others, but maybe actually I'll save them for later.
That's great. Thank you. So it's really fun to hear very different examples. Michael, yours is largely internal to the company, although you must have had to work with suppliers to do a lot of the changes that needed to happen. Rhys, you were really creating a network of players in order to create a shared solution to a problem. And Laura, you're facilitating collection of data at a broad level across agencies. So they all have a slightly different, they all have some systems view. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how do you do this stuff, and how is it different than tackling some of the other kinds of problems, or how is it different today than tackling, I used to run environmental health and safety for Hewlett-Packard before Carly, a very long time ago, but we had very different ways of tackling these problems then. How is this different?
Yeah. I think, thinking about it from a systems kind of design point of view, I mean, one thing that we keep saying is thank God that cups are so simple. Like it's just a vessel that holds liquid, because everything else around it is so incredibly complex. And I think that what's been different for us and different for the startups that we work with, and even tackling similar types of challenges within IDEO design teams, seeing how they're tackling them. The thing that's different about going after these types of challenges is you have to think about so much more. So you have to think about, where do materials come from? How are they sourced? Where do they come from? All the implications there. There's human rights and labor issues you need to think about. There's so much there. How do they get to where they're made? How are things made? How are they ultimately transported to where they're used? In their use, are they creating waste? Are they using energy? All of these types of things. And then, and really, where do they end up? And then, and when you think about the recovery infrastructure, like recycling infrastructure, it is so incredibly uneven. We have really great recycling infrastructure here in the Bay Area, but that's an anomaly. I mean, most of the world, there's either nothing or very little. And so how do you design for that? Something where it's just such a patchwork of infrastructure that's out there. And so you have to think about, maybe the best thing to design is not actually redesign the thing, but redesign the business model to maybe go to more of a reuse type solution. Are the people that we're working with, do they have even permission to sort of start to make business model changes, or are they just in charge of thinking about the experience of using something, or the radius of a specific type of product, the curve, or the fit and finish? And so those are the types of things that we're having to adapt our tools and processes and ways of thinking to tackle. So a lot of that is, when you look at a big system, then you look at those, what are those critical nodes? We practice human-centered design and design thinking. What we find is then within any node in a system where you can start to make change, it's like acupuncture, you find those kind of hot spots. If you dig in there, there are people there. There are people within a system. And then you can start to understand them, the barriers to sort of to making change in a system. And if you can then start to design for them and understand, how are they incentivized, what kind of decision-making structures exist there. I mean, there's so many things there that you can then start to design to basically support them to make that change and work differently. That's huge. And so really, you have to zoom in and out from like the human to the system and back to the human. And so we're doing a lot of that, and really kind of combining systems design with human-centered design.
Laura, how does it work at Google?
In terms of finding innovation, so there's a few things that I could speak to, but I think one thing that's interesting is we have something called a 20% project at Google. So Google aims to keep our employees for the long term, and we know that people get bored in their day-to-day job, and they might only want to do a particular role for a few years, and then they're looking for something new. And to facilitate people to explore other areas of expertise and other types of projects, and hopefully keep them at the company longer, we have something called 20% project. So this effectively lets you work 20% of your time, so 1 day a week, on a project that's not at all related to your core role. So if you're a software engineer that's doing code for Google Search, you could be working on a project to reduce the environmental footprint of a particular office building, for example. So something unrelated to your role. And actually, a lot of the really interesting, innovative projects that have been implemented at Google have come out of 20% projects, and that includes a number of the sustainability innovations that we speak about. So for example, we have a tool called Project Sunroof. So we had someone that was on our geo team who had some prior work experience in the solar industry, and had the idea that we have a lot of data in Google Maps and in Google Earth about the way that the world looks and the types of buildings that are out there and everything. We could probably do a really good job at mapping the solar potential of, for example, residential rooftops. And one of the things about accelerating uptake of solar is that a lot of the costs of solar are actually in what's called the soft costs. So the costs that it takes initially to figure out, what's the solar capacity of this rooftop? Where would you be able to put solar panels? Is it facing the right way? Is there too much shading? And doing that kind of initial assessment historically has taken solar companies quite a bit of time and effort, and that can represent about 40% of the costs of putting solar on your rooftop. So if you can reduce that, it can help with the uptake of solar. So effectively, this person on our geo team, as a 20% project, initiated research and eventually helped build this tool called Project Sunroof. So Project Sunroof estimates the solar capacity of rooftops for an individual home. You can go put your address in online, and it takes into account things like how large your roof is, what the angle of it is, what the orientation of it is in relation to the sun, what current electricity prices are, if there's any shading, and other factors like that. And it, in seconds, generates a solar estimate for your rooftop in terms of how much solar energy could be generated in a given year. And then based on local electricity costs, it also estimates how much you could save by installing solar. So this is a project that someone started on their own as a 20% project, and it's now a team that is more than one person working on this full time. So that's one example of how we facilitate innovation through enabling employees to work on things outside of their given role.
And just to follow up on that, will they then reach out to solar companies and form relationships so that this gets used in the sales process? Like, how will they actually?
Yeah. So the tool will. We have some partners, utility partners and solar developers in the tool. So in certain regions, depending on the region where you're using it, it'll actually connect an individual to 3 potential solar providers that they could contact to install solar. And in certain regions, we also partner with utilities, so the tool is offered via the utility. So in certain cases, you can only access the tool through a utility's proprietary interface.
Interesting. Now, your challenge was very internal in many ways. You totally changed how jeans are made, sold, designed. How do you roll that out in a company that's used to making them in another way?
Well, it hasn't been easy because there are always all kinds of forces internally that want to keep doing things the same way. They don't want to change. So it has been a lot of opportunities that we've had to identify internally to actually get this new technology to get adopted, right, throughout the company. So I think that's been one of the big findings. We have this thing that's going to revolutionize the way jeans are made. It will change the industry, no doubt. But even internally, once we have that, boy, really getting people to see the benefit, buy into it, if it means a change in what they're going to have to do, is not always easy, right? We're getting there. We're out there. We're commercializing it. It's online now. You can go do it online. So that's great. We're starting to realize it. But, your question made me think about what's changed, because I've been in this role for 18 years. And so you were talking about your time at HP, and I think one of the things that's really changed about sustainability innovation is before we were doing it because this whatever process or material or whatever was more sustainable, right? And that was the end goal. Like, let's make it more sustainable. It may not have performed as well. It may not have given the same aesthetic or business benefit. It didn't matter. It was going to be more sustainable. And we were really pushing that on the rest of the business. Today, much more of the emphasis is on, hey, it's got to be more sustainable, but it also has to offer a business benefit, right? We've got to sell both things in just because the world is so much more competitive than it ever was. So like this, one of the things we do, right? Levi's are made 93% of cotton, right? Cotton is 93% of all of our raw materials. And, a pair of Levi's in its whole life cycle uses literally 1,000 gallons of water. And cotton makes up 2/3 of that. So we've worked on industry projects to reduce the amount of water that cotton uses. Okay, great. That benefit, though, is kind of invisible to the consumer. So what we're now doing through our materials innovation group is looking at other fibers that use a lot less water than cotton, one of which is hemp. Hemp has about 50% of the water and chemical footprint that cotton does, so we want to use it. The only problem is when you spin hemp into yarn and weave it into a fabric, it's burlap. So who wants to wear burlap jeans? You know, it'd be super itchy, right? So we worked with one of our vendors that came up with a process they call cottonized hemp, and literally now it's softer than cotton. So this jacket is 31% cottonized hemp.
Everybody will be coming
And
to feel
it's,
your jacket.
I'm going to pass it around. And it's 69% cotton. But the hand feel, you can tell, is softer than a cotton trucker jacket, right? So there is a performance benefit. There's a business benefit. The hand feel is better. That's what we want to give to the consumer. And so this cottonized hemp now is, we're looking at that and figuring out how can we get that higher percentage of cottonized hemp into all of our products. And the other business benefit is if we can get more than 50% hemp into the product, the duty rate drops by 50%. It drops by half, right, if we're importing that product. So I'm going to pass this around. Don't take it. Don't take it, but you can feel it because the hand feel is amazing, right? So there's a business benefit to sustainability. That's, to me, that's one of the big changes, I think.
So I don't know if I'll open it up to questions from the crowd. I had one last question, maybe somebody will ask it, but I know a lot of folks come to my office and say, I love all this innovation stuff, or where do I get the job in sustainable innovation? What's the job title? What's the, I think we've heard from Laura that it's do a 20% job at a project at Google, so that's one way to do it. Submit a submission to an open crowdsourced IDEO thing that IDEO is running through Open IDEO or elsewhere. But does anybody want to know? Okay. I'm not supposed to use up your time, but if you ask that question, then I'd like to put it to the panel to, because I think the way I think about it is that it ought to be built into a lot of jobs as opposed to being, you can come get my title, but I'd love to know what you all think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, I think there's been a shift in the world of sustainability to be more customer-centric. I think there was an old paradigm where it was, hey, here's this thing, it's more sustainable, but it's going to cost more, it's poor quality, and it doesn't look as cool, or
Stacks in the original electric car.
Yeah.
Before Tesla, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And so I think that's completely shifted. And so you have now deeply customer-centric companies that are making things that are competitive in their own right, not because they're sustainable. They just happen to be that way. If you look at, for example, the Impossible Foods, Impossible Burger is one of those that's just done an amazing job. It's just it's really good to eat. It's delicious. And so it's, I was just reading that they piloted in St. Louis with Burger King, and they drove there's 28% more traffic to Burger King stores during that pilot. It's incredible. And so I think that's one thing, is if there are companies who are doing that, or if you have an idea for a company, really just start with the user, think about that competitive landscape, make something that is solving their needs, and then build a business around that. I think also as we look at a shift toward the kind of world that we want, there's a whole lot of things that need to be true for that to happen, and really spend time talking to people, talking to companies, talking to users, talking to supply chains, understand where the gaps are, like in that vision of what you want the world to look like and where it is today, and those are there's so many places to start companies or to join companies that are like plugging holes in that gap between today and what that future vision looks like. And anyway, it seems like incredibly fertile ground to start new businesses.
Laura?
So to follow on from the 20% project, I'll say that we need people working on sustainability, everywhere, in every role, in every part of society. We need champions everywhere. So it might not be your job title. You might not be the sustainable innovation specialist, but no matter what job you end up in, look for opportunities to help contribute to this challenge. At Google, we have over 100,000 employees, and we have less than 50 employees working full-time on sustainability, which is still more than most companies, but is not nearly enough. We have a number of different sustainability teams across the company embedded in the business, but we do most of what we do through a large integrated network of stakeholders across the company that are champions, that are allies that we work with to implement projects. And we could never do, most of what we do if we didn't have those champions embedded in different parts of the business.
And I will say, if you want to get a job in working in a company in sustainability, then you are at the right place. Because I used to advise people to study policy or something like that, or study environmental science. Today, the people that we're hiring are people who have their MBA from an amazing school like Cal, right, and Haas. I want my kickback later. But they've studied, they've got the business background, but they've spent their internship time, that time working for a company on sustainability. So you've got the sustainability background, but you have the business skills to apply it to exactly what we're talking about, which is, whether it's products or processes or whatever that is more sustainable, it's also meeting that business need. And that's the critical thing today. So if you want a job in sustainability, you've got to have both. You've got to have that sustainability grounding and know what a life cycle assessment is, and know what materiality analysis are. But then you also need to know, how does that work for the business?
All right, the floor is yours. Who has a question?
Please go ahead and come up to one of the microphones if you have a question. We have one on each side.
Martha.
Sort of for Michael, but for all of you. Have you noticed a big shift in customers' interest and response to visibility, transparency in terms of sustainability, instead of trying to pretend to hide it and make something look like something else, like the Impossible Burger? By Impossible talking about that it is a different material, that it's a different contents, that creates the interest. Is that clear?
Yes.
People want to know what's inside now, not hide the recycled content.
Yes. So I would say in general, our consumer insights group, which has been looking at consumer behavior around apparel and sustainability for years, has seen a shift, right? For many years, the consumer did not want to pay more for sustainability. It was part of the price of entry. If anything, it was a differentiator, right? And it's not one of the decision factors. Right? People still buy apparel because it is good price value, it is stylish, it makes your butt look good, it has high quality, et cetera, et cetera. Sustainability is like number 9 on decision factors, and it probably always will be, okay? But more and more what we're seeing with not only millennials but Gen Z is an increasing willingness, at least this is what we're getting in survey data, to pay a little bit more for the sustainable product. Okay. Now we're not seeing that yet in the market, and we're not pricing our more sustainable products higher because we just want to see that the consumer recognizes the benefit. And I mean, you were talking about, right? Sales rates are higher, right? That's what I want to see. I want to see price parity, sales rates of sustainable products higher than regular products. That is going to make the case for us. Mm.
On our end, Google also makes a line of consumer hardware and electronics products, including the Pixel phone, Google Home Hub, and also we have a variety of Nest products as well. And the Nest thermostat, from the beginning, it's been marketed for its energy savings benefits. The Nest thermostat saves a household 12 to 15% on its energy costs, and it's been an incredibly popular product. I mean, you see it as almost a luxury item now in homes where people, highlight the fact that they have a Nest thermostat. So that's been really interesting to see. And the cumulative savings of that thermostat have been in the order of, I think it's 29 billion kilowatt hours saved total cumulatively for everyone that has a Nest thermostat, which equates to more than 3 times the annual energy use of Google, which is a fairly big number.
Michael, I have an innovation challenge for Levi's, and that is to make a pair of jeans that makes my butt look good, or that I have a butt. That's a big challenge, so take that back to the company. We're going to have time for just a couple more questions also, so please.
Not a possible one.
Touché.
Hi, so I actually have two kind of combined questions, and Laura, if you could kind of start off, because some of them are a little Google specific, but then maybe the panel can comment on like the general theme. But since you brought up energy, I was curious, how does that particular like energy function at Google across kind of your department? And now I didn't know this, but like Google buys as much energy as like the city of San Francisco, like the entire city of San Francisco. So you've become the biggest buyer of energy in the world. So now that you're committed to doing things in a renewable way, and you're almost becoming or it seems like with sidewalk infrastructure partners and like a couple of, and like Google Energy as well, that you're actually investing in infrastructure to be more sustainable in energy beyond even your own consumption. So, and do you see that happening in, like, for example, with Levi's, if you're you're consuming a large amount of a particular material, but then you realize that, it's better for us to produce this, and then do you kind of go beyond your own company? Do you see opportunities for things like that happening in sustainability or via sustainability?
That's what the cotton thing was.
Yeah,
right?
and I think, and related to also, like, Google faces a good amount of flack, obviously, for data issues. And, when we're talking about sustainability, one of the biggest problems is that we don't have enough information. And there is, like, a big data play in that space. So how do you all kind of see the role of data, and do you have ideas on better governance around how we're using it for sustainability, and like, should that exist, and how would you do it?
Sure. So when it comes to energy and emissions of our own operations, Google's been a carbon neutral company for 12 years, since 2007, and that's something that we approach through a three-part strategy. So first is making sure we're as energy efficient as possible, so reducing the energy that we are using. Secondly, we procure large amounts of renewable energy. We're the largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy in the world, and as you mentioned, our electricity use is now larger on an annual basis globally than the amount of energy used by the city of San Francisco. And we match 100% of the electricity we use annually with renewable energy purchases. So we've signed to date 34 power purchase agreements around the world for a total of 3.75 gigawatts of energy. So that's one way that we're reducing emissions. And then thirdly, whatever energy use is left, so non-electricity energy use, we offset through high quality carbon offsets. So that's how we're addressing it in terms of our own energy use. And then when it comes to energy use that we can impact through our enabling technologies, we have all of these tools, like I mentioned, where we're really trying to figure out how we can solve these programs at a global scale. And one way that we've done that is we partnered I think it was about a year ago that we launched a tool called the Environmental Insights Explorer. So one thing that we heard from cities around the world is that there's hundreds of cities around the world that are trying to set targets and baselines for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but a number of cities just really don't have the data that they need to be able to put together a good estimate, or they don't have the expertise to do so, in particular smaller and mid-sized cities. So we partnered with the Global Covenant for Mayors to launch a tool last year during the Global Climate Action Summit that took place in San Francisco in September. And this tool, essentially, we use Google data in Google Maps and Google Earth to automate the process of calculating greenhouse gas emissions at a municipal scale. So we piloted it with 5 cities initially, and we have plans to do it with many more. So effectively, we look at the buildings data that we have in Google Maps, and we can generate a buildings emissions estimate from that. And then we look at the trips data that we have in Google Maps from Google Maps Transit and everything to generate a transportation emissions estimate. And then on the solutions side, we use Project Sunroof to generate a solar estimate potential for a city. If they're looking at how much of their energy use they could get from solar, we can generate an estimate of that. And to date, that's been used, for example, by the city of San Jose to estimate how much they could generate from solar energy and how much that could contribute to their energy plan.
Rhys, I know we had you talk about cups, but you have a broader role at IDEO, and maybe you have some thoughts on big data and transformation of broader industries.
Yeah, I think 2 things on that. So yeah, my role at IDEO is as an organizational and systems designer too. So really thinking about how we work with organizations to transform themselves. And I think what we're seeing right now is, there's a lot of companies out there that have been undergoing digital transformation, really trying to kind of large incumbent companies that are trying to keep up with these digitally native companies that are coming on. And I think we're starting to see that now too with the circular first companies and sustainability first companies. They're sort of just born with that ethos baked in from the beginning. And so working with a lot of companies to transform in that way. A lot of the technology is already out there for the sustainability solutions. For the things that we were trying to accomplish. A huge part of the challenge is just the right business models, but also organizational. So much of it's organizational. So it's just, there's so many, like you were talking about scaling this throughout Levi's. I mean, we're seeing that all over. Is just people have to rethink all the different parts of the organization in order to make those shifts. If you make plastic water bottles and all of a sudden you want to move to aluminum, you now have to spin up an aluminum supply chain. I mean, there's just so much stuff that goes into it. It can sound like a very simple design decision on paper, but there's so much that needs to then happen all the way through to make that a reality. And so that's something that we're working with companies more and more on. What I would love from Google would be a tool to help guide those design decisions, kind of on the fly. What's the on the spot life cycle sort of analysis or assessment tool, because
might be
I think there is a possibility there with maybe Autodesk Google mashup could be amazing. But that's the kind of, I think there's just so many decisions that have way bigger consequences. And so how do we make those easier? On the flip side of that, those decisions that have big consequences, how do you make those decisions in the right place? If you make decisions about buying cotton or buying a fiber that is lower water, you start to then shift the whole industry. I've heard about Google's power purchase agreements starting to make it easier for companies in those areas where you have those to actually buy renewable energy, because they've you've shifted the field and set the stage for that. So I think being strategic too about sort of where companies are making those big plays in those decisions, so that it can actually shift the whole field, not just their company, and that's huge. And that requires some foresight, but also a little bit of collaboration and thinking about how to work together.
Is there one more question? I know, 2 minutes we have. Phew.
Okay. As sustainability becomes more and more top of mind for more people, more consumers, particularly Gen X and millennials, are marketing departments tapping into that? Is there a business advantage, for example, Levi's, to say not only can you get the jeans the way you want them, when you want them, where you want them, but the way we're doing this is more sustainable, and here's why? Or is that, as number 9 on the hit parade, not going to make it into the marketing campaign because it's there's only so much room? And I think this applies elsewhere too, for the people that might be using the reusable cups, and for Google as well.
Has that come up in the cup conversation?
The marketing piece?
Is it better for Starbucks and the other players to have reusable cups? I mean, as a marketing question, come drink our coffee because we have reusable cups?
Yeah, it's not, it's something that we're not putting front and center. I mean, I think they have public commitments that they've made to their board and to their shareholders and to others to solve this issue. They also know that it's actually the regulatory landscape is shifting quite quickly with plastic bag bans and single-use, packaging bans and taxes, all that kind of stuff. And so the need to get ahead of that is large, but it's not right now. It's not coming from a marketing place, and we've been testing kind of the marketing aspect of it, and it's complicated. Yeah, people aren't making their decisions solely based on sustainability. It's still largely about convenience, and it's about performance, and it's about those kind of things.
Yeah.
So my answer is different. My answer is absolutely. Marketing is critical. For a couple reasons. One, we see the consumer demand increasing. We see our customers, who are the big wholesale accounts, asking for more sustainability, and we see our competitors talking about it more. The reason everybody is interested in it is because next year, 2020, Gen Z, some of you are Gen Z, right? Born after 1995, right? Who's Gen Z? Anybody in the room, right? By next year, you guys are going to represent 30% of the global population. Okay, that is our next target consumer, all of you. And according to the research, right, this Friday is the global climate strike, right, led by a 16-year-old girl from Sweden named Greta Thunberg, right? This generation is digital natives. You're activists. You want to change the world. All of consumer product companies want to market to that generation, want to be able to have products that really represent, you know, the best of what people can be. And more sustainable is what this generation is demanding. And so you bet everybody is focused on Gen Z consumers. And if they aren't marketing now, they will be.
Yeah, it's going to be tough if we have to just be reactive. We're doing this because there's a regulation or because our supplier is requesting it. It's when there's a marketing advantage, that's when it'll take off.
I only have one tiny adjustment to what Michael just said. It's Greta Thunberg. Greta
I stand
Thunberg.
corrected.
The Swede. And for those of you who are first years, you're going to come to learn and know my love for the Nordics. And that's all the classes that I teach here is on Nordic sustainability and their leadership here. This brings us to a close of this Peterson event, the first of the year on sustainable innovation. And my humble hope, and I think our humble hope, would be that we consider ourselves, all of us, as sustainable innovators. And another class that Sara has led for many years was called Problem Finding, Problem Solving. There are enough problems out there in the world. Why not go and find one and then use that as a thing about which you're going to start your company, about which you're going to innovate to solve, rather than trying to manufacture demand for shit the world doesn't need. So I think the sustainable innovation mindset, it's a mindset. And as Michael said so many times, sustainability as a lens for innovation. Would you kindly join me in thanking our panelists and Sara, our wonderful moderator. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Sara here to talk about sustainable innovation is now a focus area for the Center for Responsible Business. But before I do, where's Michael's coat? Who has it? There we are. All right. So, Sara, please, if you'd be so kind, and also she'll give us some instructions on what's to come immediately afterwards.
Feel free to take a seat if you'd like. You can continue to be up here for photo ops, but if you feel uncomfortable just standing here, it's up to you. So I'm Sara, and I'm the Associate Director here at the Center for Responsible Business. I'm excited to welcome you to our Mix and Mingle and Happy Hour. Before we do that, I want to lay out just a small sample of what we're doing at the CRB in this space and ways that you guys can get engaged with it. So as you heard today, we're really looking at how sustainable innovation is utilizing systems thinking and open innovation to solve pressing sustainability challenges. And we're looking to move beyond just remedying harm that companies do into how companies can be net positive companies. We're looking at launching a number of programs in this, including a sustainable innovation lab where we're partnering with companies on pressing sustainability challenges. We're looking at partnering with some of the hard science departments on campus to launch a sustainable materials research hub. And we're also launching some fireside chat series where you can hear more one-on-one from practitioners about their career paths in this space and different ways and models that you can get to be working in this field. Some of the partners we're looking at are Project Drawdown. We have upcoming talks with Unilever and General Mills. So more to come on this. But while you're here tonight, we would love for you guys to meet each other. We're building a community here. We're really excited to have all of the students, the faculty, the staff, the practitioners that are here. And in the back, you'll find two activities. One, we have some ideation sheets. We want to hear from you guys. What subtopics under here should we be focusing on? Which partner should we be engaging with? So please take some time to fill that out. And if you have specific companies or contacts in mind, we have some sheets for that as well. And lastly, if this is your jam, you are just so stoked about everything that was talked about here, please come find me. I'd love to talk to you about how we can be more strategic about engaging and way to leverage your passion and enthusiasm and partnership here at the center. So with that, please grab some drinks. I know it's midterm, so I appreciate those of you who are skipping out on studying to be here. Take a little break, go back, study, go to your evening classes. Thank you all.